Hello there. Tonight we step into a winter so sharp that the latch of the door bites your fingers before the night has even settled. The roof above you is dark with old soot, the rushes underfoot hold yesterday's damp, and every breath seems to ask whether your chest is worth keeping warm. You are inside, which is meant to be safer, though let's be honest, you probably won't survive this if your plan is one thin blanket and a brave attitude. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are listening from somewhere warm, cold, or suspiciously comfortable, leave your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights and let the last grey of evening drain from the room around you. The day has been rubbed away slowly from the roof beams, the table, and the faces of people still moving, because stopping too early is a luxury. The house does not keep winter out so much as bargain with it. The walls may be timber, wattle and daub, stone, or whatever the household can afford. In much of medieval Europe, glass windows remain expensive for ordinary homes, so openings are closed with shutters, cloth, oiled parchment, thin horn, or little at all. The shutter is pushed tight, but a fine line of air still finds the seam. It is talented, very committed. A woman presses a twist of rag into the gap because every draught steals from the night's ration of warmth. Someone kicks loose floor rushes back toward the centre, away from threshold damp. Fresh rushes would be nicer. Sweet herbs among them would be nicer still. But old rushes are common enough, and old rushes have opinions. They hold crumbs, ash, bent stems, and the faint sour smell of wet shoes. The main heat comes from the hearth, not a tidy little fireplace in the modern sense. In many medieval homes, especially earlier and humbler ones, the fire burns in an open hearth, with smoke finding its way upward through a smoke hole, a louver, or the general optimism of the roof. Chimneys spread over the medieval centuries, especially in wealthier buildings, but they are not yet the ordinary blessing of every cottage. The fire gives warmth, light, cooking, and trouble from the same glowing place on the floor. You crouch nearer than is comfortable for your eyes because your shins are cold and your back is colder. The heat arrives unevenly. One cheek warms, one shoulder stays annoyed. Smoke wanders sideways, then changes its mind. A stool is pulled nearer, then back again when the rush mat smells a little too interested in catching fire. Outside, the winter is not merely picturesque. The winter of 1309 to 1310 is remembered in some chronicles for hard cold and frozen rivers. Records are uneven, but when a bad winter comes it reaches mills, roads, animals, ale and sleep. A frozen river can stop a mill wheel, delay grain, and make a sack of flour feel suddenly important. The house reacts before anyone explains the weather. Buckets are brought in so the water does not freeze as hard by morning. A loaf is moved farther from the damp wall. Shoes are set sole up near the hearth, close enough to soften, not close enough to curl. Too far and the leather stays stiff. Too near, and tomorrow begins with a smell that says someone has cooked their footwear. Winter sleep begins long before anyone lies down. It begins with closing, covering, dragging, folding, checking, banking, and low arguing about whether the door has really been fastened. The bar across it does not make the room warm, but it stops the door from breathing too freely. A chest is shifted, because a heavy thing in the right place can discourage air from travelling where it pleases. The household does not own central heating, it owns habits. And habits matter because medieval indoor temperatures can fall brutally low when the fire sinks. People expect pockets of warmth, shared heat, and the memory of the fire held inside walls, textiles, bodies, and embers. The surviving evidence refuses to settle the question of exactly how cold most sleeping rooms became in different regions and classes, because no one is leaving tidy thermometer readings beside the ale cup. Archaeologists can read hearths, smoke staining, and building materials. Written records complain about frost, fuel, illness, and ruined crops. But the exact cold of a room at 3 in the morning slips away. Your fingers move slower now. A younger child holds a wooden bowl after the last pottage has been scraped out, not because food remains, but because the bowl has kept a little heat. No king is going to pause a war to report that a child has discovered the emotional value of a warm bowl. Yet this is one small technology of survival. Hold what was warm. Keep near what still gives. Waste nothing that has heat in it. A rushlight is set in its holder, thin and pale, made from the pith of a rush dipped in fat. It burns cheaply compared with a good wax candle, and behaves like a small, nervous creature. If the fat is poor, it smells. Medieval lighting is basically a flame with opinions. Bedding must be shaken, a pot must be covered, the fire must be arranged so morning is possible. The cold presses hardest where the room thins. It gathers at the door, under the window, along the floor, and after someone steps away from the hearth. You do not walk through equal air. Warmth near the flame, coolness near the wall, smoke above head height, a low bite around the ankles. The body maps the room better than the eye does. Someone lifts a hanging away from the wall and checks for damp. Cloth is not merely comfort here, it is architecture that can be folded. A bed curtain, if the household has one, can hold the warmth of sleepers in a smaller volume of air. Even a cloak over a line can change how the cold moves. The household begins to draw inward. Useful objects creep toward the hearth. Shoes, stool, cup, knife, folded cloth. People do the same. A sleeve is tugged down over a wrist. A cap is found. A younger member is sent for something and returns quickly, because the colder corner by the storage area has a way of improving obedience. You remain near the fire as the room changes from working space to sleeping space. Medieval rooms often serve many purposes, and sleeping is not always tucked into private bedrooms. A hall can host eating, labour, storage, conversation, servants, animals nearby, and bodies at rest after dark. Privacy is a narrow and expensive thing. Warmth is more urgent. A final armful of fuel is considered with care. Wood is labour before it is warmth. It must be cut, gathered, carted, bought, dried, guarded, or begged. So no one heaps the fire just for the lovely crackle of it. A great blaze is cheerful, yes, but cheerfulness that burns through tomorrow's supply is not admired for long. The flame lowers, wood ticks, a bench leg scrapes. The shutter gives a small tap in the wind. The rushlight leans into its own little pool of fat. You have not reached the bed yet, and already the night has made its terms clear. Warmth will not be granted. It will be assembled, piece by piece, by hands that know where to place cloth, when to move closer, how to save embers, and how to make a room just survivable enough before the straw mattress waits in the darker corner. The straw mattress waits where the fire cannot quite reach it, a lumpy promise in the darker part of the room. It is not waiting like a modern bed waits, smooth and offended if the pillows are not arranged properly. It waits like a useful object that has survived many bodies, many winters, and more than one person landing on it with too much faith. Before you touch it, someone checks the ropes beneath. A medieval bedstead, when a household can manage one, is often a frame strung with rope or leather thongs. The bedding rests on that web, and the whole thing must be tightened now and then, because a sagging bed is not romantic. It is a wooden argument with gravity. The phrase, "sleep tight," is sometimes linked to these rope beds, though historians still argue whether that explanation is truly medieval in origin, or a later, tidy little story that sounds too pleased with itself. The action itself is real enough. A loose bed gives way in the middle, and cold gathers wherever your body sinks and the coverings pull apart. A hand takes a bed key or a simple wooden lever and twists the cord tighter through holes in the frame. The rope creaks. The post gives a small complaint. This is not luxury. This is maintenance before sleep. A bed is a machine, and the machine must be persuaded not to fold you inward like a badly packed bundle. The mattress above is not filled with springs, foam, or anything invented by people who believe the spine has rights. It may be a sack of straw, hay, chaff, wool flock, feathers if the household is richer, or a mixture of whatever can be obtained, dried, and kept from becoming disgraceful. In many medieval households, straw mattresses are common because straw is available after harvest and can be replaced when it becomes too dirty, too flat, or too full of tiny residents with excellent biting skills. The ticking is rough under your fingers. It is a fabric case, not a mattress in the modern sense. If the straw inside is old, it has learned the shape of previous nights. Some stalks press sideways, some poke. One stiff bit announces itself near the hip, as if appointed by the parish to prevent pride. The bed is lifted from the floor for good reasons. Cold lives low, dirt lives low, mice conduct business there. A raised bed keeps the body away from the packed earth or boards, and it allows air to move under the frame. That sounds elegant until the air is winter air, and then moving air becomes less of a feature and more of a personal insult. So bedding must do the real work. The frame only begins the negotiation. A bolster lies at the head, firm and not especially forgiving. Pillows exist, of course, but their number and softness depend on wealth. In humbler homes, a folded cloak, spare garment, or stuffed roll may serve well enough. You arrange it with care because cold sleep punishes gaps. A cheek on linen can chill quickly. A neck left exposed becomes the first rebel. The sheet, if there is one, is linen, and linen in winter begins as a cold handshake. It does not mean harm, it simply has no warmth to offer until the body lends it some. Wealthier households may own finer linen sheets, more coverlets, feather beds, and proper bed hangings. Poorer households rely on coarser cloth, old cloaks, blankets, and bodies placed close enough to turn one person's heat into another person's argument for staying put. The bedstead itself tells on the household. Some medieval beds are simple platforms or trestle frames. Some are grand objects with carved posts, testers and curtains. In elite homes, beds can be valuable possessions, listed in inventories and passed through wills. A bed is not just where someone sleeps. It can be property, display, dowry, inheritance, storage, and status standing there on four legs. But at night, status still has to deal with cold feet. You lift the bedding edge and the smell rises faintly. Dry straw, body warmth from earlier use, linen, wood, and the old breath of the room. Bedding is aired when weather and labour allow, but a deep winter does not always permit cheerful laundering. Water freezes, cloth dries slowly. Carrying wet linen in cold weather feels like volunteering to hug a pond, so the bed has a history. Not a dramatic history, a practical one. The sort that says several people have survived here, and the bed remembers. A small, lesser-known trick belongs to the mattress itself. Straw can be refreshed, stirred, and rearranged, and in some places fragrant plants may be mixed with bedding or strewn nearby when available. Lavender, sweet woodruff, meadowsweet, fleabane, or other local herbs. The name fleabane is doing no subtle work. Nobody entirely agrees on whether such plants made a major difference against insects, or mostly made people feel that they had at least declared war. Either way, a sharper scent in bedding is not only pleasant, it suggests care, cleanliness, and a household trying to manage what cannot be fully controlled. The bed curtains matter more than decoration. If the bed has them, they are pulled not for drama, but to trap the small weather made by human bodies. A curtain creates a chamber inside the room, and that chamber warms faster than the whole house ever will. The principle is simple. Warm the smallest space you can. Your body cannot heat a hall. It may, with help, heat the air between a mattress, a blanket, and a curtain drawn close enough not to brush your nose. The curtain fabric may be wool, linen, or another textile suited to rank and means. It can block drafts, catch smoke, hold smells, and turn the bed into a small tent with furniture ambitions. Inside it, the air is less honest but kinder, a little stale perhaps, a little close, still preferable to the free and democratic cold outside the fabric. You sit on the edge and the ropes answer under you. Not loudly, just enough. The mattress gives, then stops. Straw shifts with a dry whisper. The bed is narrower than comfort would like, especially if it must hold more than one sleeper. Medieval beds are not always the huge communal nests of imagination, but sharing is common enough, by family, servants, travellers, or circumstance. For now, the bed is being prepared as an object first, tightened, shaken, layered, guarded from drafts. The coverlet is drawn up and tested by hand. Wool has a different character from linen. It catches, holds, and irritates in equal measure. A coarse wool blanket may scratch at the chin, but it keeps the heat that linen only borrows. Fur, skins, or heavier textiles make a greater difference where they are available. A feather bed or down covering is a serious comfort, and also a serious sign that someone in the household has resources beyond mere endurance. The fire behind you drops again, and the room leans colder. The bed must now become its own little climate. The ropes have been tightened, the straw has been beaten into a less treacherous shape, the bolster sits ready, the curtains hang open for one last moment, while the bedding takes in the last weak warmth from the room. A hand smooths the top layer, not because smoothness is essential, but because people have always liked to make even a hard thing look slightly more willing before they trust it with the night. The top layer is not yet enough. A bed can be tightened, shaken, and dressed with all the dignity available to it, but the body still has to climb inside, and the body arrives wearing its own little problems. Damp hems, cold toes, a collar that has rubbed all day, hair that smells faintly of hearth smoke, hands that have held wood, bowls, rope, door bars, and winter itself by the edge. No one treats undressing as a simple matter of comfort. Clothing is warmth, modesty, labour, cost, and habit folded together. In many medieval households, people do not sleep naked as a rule in winter, because that would require an impressive amount of optimism and perhaps a private treaty with death. Linen shifts, undertunics, shirts, smocks, caps, hosen, stockings, wraps, veils, and older garments all have their place, depending on gender, region, rank, and what the household owns. You loosen the outer layer first. Not everything comes off. A belt is unfastened because a belt digs into the ribs when lying down, and sleep already has enough enemies. The outer tunic or gown may be folded close by, not tossed away. Tossing clothing into the cold is how mourning becomes a punishment arranged the night before. Better to keep a garment within reach, perhaps near the bed or under another cover, where it can hold a little of the room's remaining warmth. The linen next to the skin is not luxurious for most people. It is useful because it can be washed more often than wool, and it protects the heavier garments from sweat and body oils. That is the mainstream fact hiding under the sleeve. Linen body garments are a basic layer in much of medieval Europe, especially where flax is grown and processed. Wool keeps heat better, but wool directly against the skin can be scratchy, greasy, and difficult to clean. Linen takes the daily insult first. You keep the shift or shirt on. It is not merely prudishness, though modesty matters, especially in shared rooms. It is also practical. If several people sleep within sight or reach of one another, clothing prevents embarrassment from becoming part of the household schedule. The body is never only private here. It belongs to work, family, rank, and reputation. Even sleep has witnesses. A cap is found and pulled down. This is one of the simplest defences against cold, and it does not require a learned physician to recommend it. The head and neck lose heat quickly when left exposed, and medieval people know very well that a covered head helps. Nightcaps and coifs are not only quaint images from later centuries. Head coverings in bed have deep practical logic. Your ears stop complaining first, then the back of the neck begins to forgive. The cap smells of linen, skin, and the shelf where it has been resting. It may be tied under the chin or simply pulled low. If hair is long, it may be braided or tucked away. Loose hair is warm, yes, but it tangles, catches, and carries the day with it. For women in many medieval settings, covered hair is tied to modesty in public and domestic life. At night, the meaning softens but does not vanish. A coif or kerchief can be both proper and useful, which is a pleasing arrangement when winter is taking attendance. Your feet are the harder matter. Stockings or hose may stay on if they are dry enough. Wet wool against skin is a misery with legal ambitions. If the feet have been damp from the yard, from floor drafts, or from shoes that never fully recovered by the hearth, the choice becomes unpleasant. Keep damp cloth on and trap cold near the skin, or remove it and trust the bedding to rescue the toes. The answer depends on how damp, how tired, and how many blankets stand between you and regret. Someone near the hearth rubs their feet briskly before climbing into bed. Not elegantly, not like a self-care ritual with a little ceramic dish, more like a person trying to convince their own blood to resume employment. A child's feet are checked by a hand that is not especially gentle, but knows what cold toes mean. If there are dry wrappings, they are used. If not, the child is placed where another body can warm them. Medieval winter has very little interest in personal space as a moral principle. Clothes used for sleep may be old. A garment too worn for proper public use can become a night layer, a bed wrap, a thing kept near because it still has some service left. Cloth is expensive in labour, even when the fibre is humble. Sheep must be shorn, flax retted and broken, wool carded, thread spun, cloth woven, fulled, cut, sewn, mended, and guarded from moths, damp, sparks, and careless children. A sleeve does not retire just because it is ugly. It is demoted. Here is a small, odd detail of winter dressing. Some people use separate footcloths, wrappings, or bits of worn textile rather than shaped stockings when need or poverty requires. A strip of cloth can become a warmer, a liner, a padding against a rough shoe, or a night wrapping. It is not glamorous. It is also exactly the kind of object that vanishes from grand history, because no one paints a heroic portrait of a rag keeping a toe alive. Specialists still hesitate over whether surviving clothing finds show typical daily practice or the accidents of preservation, because cloth rarely survives unless it is buried in unusual conditions, sealed in walls, preserved in bogs, or recorded in accounts. The finest garments are more likely to be named, valued, and kept. The worn things that did the most work are often the least visible, so the coldest, most useful night clothing sits partly in the silence between documents. The body knows it anyway. You tuck the lower edge of the linen closer around the thighs. You pull a wool layer across the shoulders. A pin is removed because sleeping with metal near the throat is a poor plan, even by medieval standards. Laces are loosened, garters are checked. Anything that cuts circulation becomes dangerous in cold. Warmth needs blood moving under the skin, not trapped by a tight tie left on because the room is too cold for fussing. The social rules in the room are quiet but present. No one wants to expose too much. No one wants to make a performance of discomfort. A servant or younger household member may wait until others settle before claiming a place. A married couple has different privacy from an apprentice, a child, a widow, or a guest. A woman nursing a baby keeps clothing arranged for warmth and access. An older person keeps a layer on that others might remove, because the cold reaches them sooner and leaves more slowly. The humour of it, if there is any, lies in how little of bedtime belongs to softness. You are not preparing for a dreamy collapse into pillows. You are managing textiles like a cautious quartermaster. This cloth stays. That one comes off. This sleeve must not twist. The cap must not slide. The stockings must be dry, or at least not openly treacherous. The body is wrapped according to a map drawn by cold, shame, habit, and cost. At last the bedding lifts. The first contact is unpleasant. Linen gives its cold greeting again. Your knees draw up before pride can object. The shirt twists once under the hip and must be corrected with a small, annoyed wriggle. The cap slips. Someone laughs softly, not enough to wake the smaller child, just enough to admit that winter has made everyone ridiculous. The blankets settle over the clothed body. For a while, nothing warms. Then the space under the covers begins to change. Breath stays close. Wool takes what heat it can. Linen stops feeling like a thing from a cellar. The body, still dressed for half a day and half a night, becomes the stove the bed was waiting for, while the hearth behind the curtains sinks lower, and someone reaches out one last time to pull a loose garment closer before sleep can begin its slow, suspicious work. The garment lies within reach, but the real concern waits behind the curtain, where the fire has settled into a lower, redder language. It no longer lights the room properly. It breathes under its own ash, and that is good if someone has done the work correctly. A roaring fire belongs to the busy part of evening. A sleeping house needs something more careful. Heat hidden just well enough to survive until morning. You listen for the shift in sound. Flame is talkative, embers are not. They make small clicks inside the ash, a low settling, almost like a joint easing after labour. The person tending them moves slowly, because a careless foot in the dark can scatter sparks into rushes, bedding or clothing, and nobody wants the night to become exciting in that particular way. Fire is not a background comfort here. It is the household's working heart. In most medieval homes, the hearth cooks food, warms bodies, dries small things, gives light, heats water, and marks the place where people gather when the room has no better argument against winter. Losing it in deep cold means waking to a house that must be coaxed from nothing: cold tinder, stiff fingers, reluctant fuel, and breath that feels too visible for indoors. So the embers are banked. A stick is nudged inward. Ash is drawn over the coals, not to kill them, but to slow their hunger. It is a quiet skill, this covering. Too much ash and the fire suffocates. Too little and the coals spend themselves before dawn. A household that knows winter knows how to make heat wait. The poker, if there is one, is kept where it can be found. In poorer homes, a charred stick or simple iron tool may do the work. Iron is useful, but iron is also costly enough that tools are watched. Someone uses the edge of a broken pot or a flat scrap of wood to shift ash. The movement is practiced. No one gives a lecture. The hand has learned from cold mornings. A small pot may be set near the hearth, not on the hottest place now, but where it will not freeze hard. Water is heavy in winter in a way summer forgets. If it freezes in the bucket, morning begins with chopping, melting, or swearing under the breath while trying not to wake someone important. Ale, pottage, broth, and washing water all depend on heat returning before the household can properly move. Fuel decides more than mood. Medieval fuel varies by place: wood, charcoal, peat, turf, brushwood, reeds, heather, straw, dried dung in some regions, and whatever local landscape permits. Woodland rights matter. In many areas, peasants may have customary access to gather fallen wood or use common resources, but such rights can be limited, contested, or watched. The cold is not only weather, it is law, labour, and distance stacked beside the hearth. A bundle of kindling is held back for morning. That restraint takes discipline. The room would be warmer now if someone fed the fire more generously. Your toes would approve. Your nose would write a song of gratitude. But morning has its own claim. A household that burns everything at night may wake to a beautiful memory and no practical future. Near the hearth the ash has layers. Fine grey powder lies over darker crumbs of char, and beneath that, if luck and skill agree, a coal keeps its red centre. Some households preserve fire from day to day rather than relight it completely, especially when tinder is poor or weather is damp. Flint and steel can make sparks, but sparks are not obedient servants. Dry tinder must be ready. Charred cloth, dry fungus, tow, or fine shavings may help, depending on region and period. The whole process takes hands that can still feel their fingertips. A quirky little object sometimes enters this world: the curfew cover. In some medieval towns and households, a metal or ceramic cover could be placed over embers to reduce the danger of stray sparks while keeping the coals alive. The word curfew comes from the Old French couvre-feu, meaning cover fire, and although later curfew laws take on wider meanings, the domestic idea is wonderfully blunt. Cover the fire. Stop the house from burning. Try not to freeze. A very full civic philosophy. Really, if slightly lacking in decorative optimism. Experts remain cautious about claiming whether curfew rules were enforced in the same way across medieval towns and villages, because the evidence changes by region, century, and local authority. Some bells may have signalled the time to cover fires. Some regulations aim to reduce urban fire risk where timber buildings stood close together like gossiping neighbours. But the exact nightly habits behind those rules are harder to pin down. A law can be copied neatly into a record. A sleepy person covering embers badly leaves fewer documents. The danger is real enough. Open flame inside buildings made of timber, thatch, wattle, cloth, rushes, and stored dry goods is not a minor matter. Town authorities across medieval Europe worry about fire because one house can become many houses quickly. In dense streets, a spark does not need ambition, it only needs a draft. The room around you has been arranged with that fear in mind. Bedding is not dragged too near, the rushes nearest the hearth are sparse or pushed back. A hanging cloth is checked so it does not sway toward heat. Children are told not to fuss with sticks. A dog, if present, is discouraged from settling in the exact wrong place, which dogs throughout history have considered an attack on their artistic judgment. Smoke has changed with the dying fire. It is less strong now, but it still hangs in the upper parts of the room, caught in beams and dark thatch. Smoke can help preserve rafters and drive off some insects, but it also stings eyes, stains cloth, and settles into hair. The material record complicates the question of how people balance the benefits and harms of smoky interiors, because a blackened roof beam can show long use, while not telling you how often someone coughed in the night and cursed very softly. Under the blankets, the body begins to hold its own warmth. That matters because the fire is no longer meant to warm every limb, it is meant to remain alive. It becomes less a comfort than a promise under ash. The household withdraws from it, but no one forgets it. Even half asleep, an older person may listen for the wrong sound, a crackle where none should be, or a silence too final. A hand reaches from a bed or pallet to check that nothing hangs loose near the hearth. The movement lets cold under the covers, and there is a small, irritated breath as the blanket is pulled tight again. That is how winter taxes responsibility. The person who checks the fire pays with a chilled shoulder. The embers dim to a colour that shows only when the ash shifts. The room's edges disappear. The shutter taps once, then waits. Someone murmurs for the younger child to keep their feet tucked in. The fire has been covered, not abandoned. It lies there like a buried coin of heat, carefully hidden from the night, while every sleeper depends on the chance that the red will still be waiting when the first hand reaches out for morning. The first hand does not reach for morning yet. It reaches in the dark for another body, because the bed has cooled along the outer edge, and the night has found the seam between blanket and wall. No one announces this. A knee shifts. A shoulder turns. The mattress answers with straw rubbing inside its ticking, and the small chamber inside the curtains becomes a little less cold because everyone has quietly agreed to be useful. This is where privacy loses its case. In the coldest weather, sleeping alone is a privilege, a misfortune, or a sign that something unusual is happening. Shared beds are common across much of medieval Europe, though the exact arrangements change with wealth, age, gender, marital status, household size, and local custom. Husband and wife may share, children may be tucked together, servants may sleep near one another or in the same chamber as their employers. Travellers may find themselves beside strangers in an inn, bed that has known more gossip than any priest. Warmth is one reason, space is another. Bedding is expensive, rooms are few. A bedstead, mattress, sheet, blanket, and curtain represent materials, labour, and money. If a household owns a proper bed, it is rarely treated as a purely personal island. It is a resource, and resources attract bodies. Your place has been chosen partly by rank and partly by temperature. The warmest middle belongs to someone with a stronger claim, perhaps a small child, perhaps an older person, perhaps the married pair, perhaps the person whose illness has made the household careful. The edge belongs to the less fortunate, the more junior, the one who can be told to stop wriggling. The edge is where cold keeps trying its little legal appeals. A child's foot presses against your calf. It is shockingly cold. The child has brought the outdoors with them under the blanket, like contraband. Someone makes a low sound of complaint, then lets the foot stay, because winter does not care about fairness, and the child is finally quiet. Body heat travels by contact, and contact has rules. You turn slightly, giving less than generosity might demand, and more than comfort would prefer. This sort of closeness can feel tender from a distance, but inside the bed, it is also logistics. Elbows must be placed somewhere, hair must not be trapped under another person's shoulder, a nightcap tie scratches. Someone breathes toward your cheek until you gently, carefully, almost diplomatically, shift the angle of their face. There is an entire household politics in moving an inch without starting an argument. Medieval moralists and household guides sometimes worry about who sleeps with whom, especially when servants, apprentices, unrelated adults or travellers share spaces. The concern is not imaginary, but neither is it the whole story. In ordinary practice, people often sleep in crowded conditions because there is no sensible alternative. The written sources leave room for disagreement about how strictly ideals of separation were followed in daily life, since rules, sermons, and court records tend to preserve anxiety and scandal more readily than normal nights when nothing happens except 3 people stealing the same blanket. In inns, the matter becomes even more interesting and less dignified. A traveller who pays for lodging may pay for a place in a bed, not necessarily a bed alone. Late medieval inns could provide shared sleeping arrangements, and complaints about theft, fleas, noise, and bedfellows appear often enough to suggest that the romance of travel has been lying to us for centuries. A stranger's warm back may be welcome, a stranger's boots under the bed may be less welcome, especially if your purse is nearby. Inside a household, however, shared sleep creates a different economy. The youngest are not only warmed, but watched. A nursing baby stays close to the mother, under careful arrangement of cloth and body. Older children learn the winter habit of curling inward, not sprawling like a prince painted on a tomb. Servants may sleep near the hall, near the fire, near the door, or in lofts and side spaces depending on the building. Their bodies help warm the room, but their placement also marks their status. Warmth is communal, rank is not. If you are lower in the household, you wait until others settle before claiming the remaining space. You do not fling yourself across the mattress. You slide in with the skill of someone entering a conversation already controlled by others. The blanket edge comes last to you. The better pillow is not yours. Your task is to become warm without becoming noticeable. A lesser-known habit appears in the way people manage the bedclothes while sharing. The blanket may be tucked under bodies along the outside edge, using human weight to pin warmth inside. It is simple and slightly tyrannical. Once tucked, the edge sleeper becomes part person, part draft stopper. If you need to turn, you must negotiate with the whole architecture of the bed. Medieval comfort often has this quality: clever, effective, and faintly rude. The bed grows warmer now. Not evenly. Knees make pockets of heat. The hollow behind another sleeper's back warms fastest. The edge near the curtain stays cool. Breath dampens the linen near your mouth. The air inside the bed curtains becomes thick with wool, skin, stale straw, and the sleepy irritation of people trying not to wake one another. It is not fresh. It is better than freezing. There is risk in closeness too. Lice, fleas, coughs, skin infections, and ordinary household smells all travel easily where bodies are packed. Medieval people are not unaware of this. They comb hair, wash linens when possible, air bedding, use herbs, change straw, and complain. They do not possess modern germ theory, but they understand that foulness, vermin, damp, and sickness belong to a dangerous family of conditions. No one needs a microscope to dislike a flea. Some beds have boards or low sides. Some have curtains that turn the shared space into a small, shut world. In colder regions and higher status households, enclosed beds can hold warmth with impressive efficiency. In humbler settings, a shared pallet near the hearth may do the same by human means rather than carpentry. The principle remains steady: sleep close, lose less heat, tolerate more humanity than you might otherwise choose. A foot shifts again. Someone mutters, "Still." It may be a parent. It may be an older sibling with temporary authority and no patience. The child stops moving. For a moment, the bed becomes one warm animal, many-breathed and awkward, held together by cloth and need. The fire outside the curtains has sunk into silence. The cold cannot be defeated, but it can be crowded out in places. Under the blanket, Rank, affection, irritation, duty and survival lie pressed together. A hand keeps hold of the coverlet edge. A shoulder accepts the weight against it. The small chamber of bedding holds what the room cannot, and in the dark, as straw crackles once beneath a shifting hip, the shared bed keeps making its narrow, imperfect weather. The narrow weather under the blanket depends on what lies between skin and winter. It is easy, from a comfortable distance, to say blanket, as though one word can do all that work. But your body knows the difference between linen that cools the first touch, wool that grips warmth but scratches the chin, straw that lifts you from the bed ropes, and fur that turns cold aside with a thick, animal patience. The mattress beneath you is the first defence. Straw is not soft in the way a dream might request, but it traps air. That is the useful secret. Warmth is often less about heat itself than about keeping still air close to the body. Straw, hay, chaff, wool flock, feathers and down all serve by making little spaces where air can be held and warmed. The poorer the filling, the more often it must be shaken, shifted and replaced before it becomes flat, damp, or too lively with insects. A stalk presses at your thigh through the ticking. It is not sharp enough to count as pain, just persistent enough to become part of the night's conversation. You shift, and the straw answers with a dry murmur. The rope beneath gives slightly. The whole bed reminds you that comfort is not a single thing. It is a compromise between support, insulation, cleanliness, cost, and what the harvest left behind. The cover above you may be wool, and wool has a gift medieval households value deeply. Even when damp, wool can retain some insulating power, unlike linen, which quickly becomes cold and clammy when wet. Sheep do not look like advanced heating technology, but in a winter bed their work continues. Woolen blankets, coverlets, cloaks, and old garments are not decorative extras. They are stored summer labour made useful in the dark. The blanket has weight. That matters. A heavier cover presses the warmed air close, though too much weight can pin knees and make turning a negotiation. If the wool is coarse, it scratches through the linen at the neck. You tuck the sheet higher to protect the skin, but the sheet itself is still learning to be warm. A narrow band of cold remains where the blanket lifts near the shoulder, and the hand finds it before thought does. You pull the edge down. The person beside you makes a sleepy objection, and then steals half of it back. Linen has another role. It lines, separates, and keeps things cleaner than they would be if bodies met wool and straw directly. Linen sheets are valuable household goods, counted in inventories when people have enough worth counting. They can be washed, dried, folded, and passed down, though in winter each of those verbs becomes more difficult. Wet linen in freezing weather is not laundry, it is a household crisis with sleeves. For poorer sleepers, linen may be limited or absent. A cloak may serve as a covering. Old clothing may be piled on the bed. A sack, a hide, a woven mat, a spare tunic, even a piece of rough cloth can become part of the night's defence. Nothing is just one thing. A cloak is daytime weather, social appearance, travel gear, bedding, door draft, pillow, and occasionally privacy, depending on where it is placed. If the household owns fur or skins, the bed changes. Sheepskin offers warmth with a deep, dense quality that straw and plain cloth struggle to match. Fur coverlets or lined garments belong more readily to those with means, but animal skins in some form are practical in colder regions and rural lives. The mainstream fact sits plainly in your hands. Medieval textiles are labour-intensive and costly, so warmth follows access to animals, land, trade, and skilled production. The better the material, the longer the chain of labour behind it. A small oddity hides in the ticking of the mattress. Some bedding sacks are filled not with clean golden straw from storybook imagination, but with whatever plant material is available. Oat straw, rye straw, chaff, dried bracken in some regions, or hay if it can be spared. Bracken bedding, used in parts of Britain and elsewhere, has a rough usefulness and a smell of dry hillside. It can also shelter insects and must be managed. The bed is partly furniture, partly field, partly pest hotel, which is an honest business model, but not a soothing brochure. Researchers are still split on the question of how often ordinary households replaced mattress fillings in deep winter. because household accounts tell more about elites and institutions than about quiet rural beds. Archaeobotanical finds, estate records, and later customs suggest practical patterns, but the exact rhythm of changing straw in a poor home during a long freeze remains difficult to catch. People likely did what need, weather, animals, and supply allowed. The sources are not cold enough to answer for every cottage. The blanket smells faintly of lanolin when warmed, not strongly perhaps, but enough that the wool has a body of its own. Linen smells cleaner if recently washed, sourer if winter has delayed washing too long. Straw has a dry, crushed scent until damp reaches it. Fur carries animal memory. These are not bad smells by default. They are the smell of stored warmth, and stored warmth is too useful to be judged by the nose alone. Your cheek touches the sheet near the bolster. The cloth has finally surrendered some of its chill. The first awful minute of bed is gone. Beneath you, the straw has compressed into your shape, and now it holds heat better where your body has pressed it. The bed improves because you have occupied it. This is one reason leaving the bed at night is such a serious decision. Once you abandon the warm hollow, the cold begins reclaiming it immediately. Like a landlord with no mercy and excellent punctuality. Layers must stay in order. Linen near skin, wool above, cloak where the draft works hardest, fur, if present, where it can block the worst loss, a coverlet tucked under the outer side, a spare garment over the feet. These decisions may happen without speech, but they are decisions. Medieval winter sleep is full of small engineering, performed by tired people who would not use that word. The feet remain the most demanding part. A folded scrap of wool is pushed down toward them, and the toes curl around it. The movement is small, but the relief is immediate. Warm feet can change the entire bed. Cold feet make every thought return to the same complaint. A person who warms another person's feet has performed either an act of love, duty, or defeat, sometimes all three. Beyond the curtain, ash keeps its secret red. Inside, straw, wool, linen and skin begin to work together. None of the materials is perfect. Straw pokes, wool scratches, linen chills, fur smells. Old cloth wrinkles into the ribs, but each piece catches a little heat that would otherwise leave. Each layer slows winter by a fraction. The bed does not become warm all at once. It becomes less cold in patches, then tolerable, then almost persuasive. While the blanket edge is tucked again under a hip and the small stored warmth of the bed gathers itself around your knees. The warmth gathering around your knees does not stay there by kindness alone. It needs borders. The blanket edge has been tucked under a hip, the curtain has been drawn closer, and the bed has begun to behave less like furniture and more like a small room pretending not to be one. Outside that cloth wall, winter still owns most of the chamber. The curtain moves when someone breathes too near it. A faint draught slips along the lower hem, then loses courage. This is the plain genius of bed hangings. They do not make heat, they keep it from wandering away. In wealthier medieval homes, beds with curtains, testers and hangings can be substantial possessions, named and valued in inventories. In humbler places, a simpler cloth, a cloak, or a hanging near the bed may do a smaller version of the same work. A curtain is also a social device. It gives privacy where walls do not. Not full privacy, of course. Cloth does not stop a cough, a whispered complaint, or the unmistakable sound of someone trying to find the chamber pot without admitting it. But it changes what can be seen. In a crowded room, that matters. Sleep is easier when your face is not part of the public furniture. The bed curtain smells of wool, dust, and smoke caught over many nights. If it is thick, it holds warmth better. If it is thin, it still calms the moving air. Its lower edge may brush the floor or hang short, depending on how it was made, stretched, mended, or borrowed for this purpose. A gap near the bottom becomes a little road for cold. Someone reaches down and pulls the blanket over that road, closing it with the seriousness of a mason repairing a city wall. Beyond the bed, the room has other defences. A hanging on the wall is not only there for beauty, though beauty is allowed to have a job. Tapestries and textile wall hangings in medieval elite and ecclesiastical spaces help soften rooms, display wealth, tell stories, and reduce drafts from stone walls. Stone keeps secrets well, but it also keeps cold with remarkable loyalty. A cloth-covered wall is kinder to the body than bare stone breathing winter back into the room. In a modest household, the wall hanging may be nothing like a grand tapestry. It may be an old cloth, a cloak hung where the draught is worst, a sacking panel, a piece of felt, or a spare textile pressed into service. The effect is less splendid, but the logic is the same. Put cloth between flesh and cold surface. Make the room smaller where you can. Make winter turn corners. A chest sits near the wall, broad and dark, with ironwork that feels icy if touched. It stores linen, clothing, tools, valuables, or whatever the household cannot afford to lose. At night, it becomes more than storage. It blocks a draught along the lower wall. It holds garments that can be pulled over the bed before dawn. It may even serve as a bench, a table, or a step when someone reaches a shelf. Medieval furniture is often expected to earn its keep in more than one way. The chest lid gives a low wooden sound when lifted. Inside, folded cloth keeps a different kind of cold, dry, and close. A spare coverlet is pulled free carefully because folded textiles can hide pins, crumbs, lavender, a lost lace, or a beetle that has no respect for rank. The extra layer is laid over the bed, not perfectly, just enough to cover the exposed feet and the shoulder nearest the curtain gap. One odd little winter practice belongs to the shutters. Where glass is absent or limited, a window may be closed with wooden shutters, and sometimes with horn, parchment, linen treated with oil, or a lattice covered by cloth. Oiled cloth or parchment admits a little light by day, but at night it can stiffen, wrinkle, or leak air at the edges. It is a window that behaves more like a compromise than an object. If frost gathers inside it, nobody is amazed. They are simply annoyed with evidence. Academic opinion still shifts around the problem of how widespread different window coverings were among ordinary households, because surviving buildings, account books, and images favour the better built and better recorded. A townhouse, a manor chamber, and a rural cottage leave different kinds of traces. The poor person's patched shutter may have kept someone alive for 10 winters and then vanished into kindling without leaving a signature. The shutter itself gives one tap. Not a dramatic tap, just wood meeting wood as wind presses along the outside wall. Someone outside the curtain mutters and gets up. The bed loses warmth where the blanket lifts, and every sleeper understands the cost of public duty. The person crosses the floor quickly. Bare feet or stockinged feet meet a surface that has been waiting all night to be unpleasant. A wedge is pushed under the shutter. A rag is pressed again into the seam. The small tap stops. There is a quiet satisfaction in that. Not joy. Satisfaction. The kind that comes when one narrow problem has been denied entry. The person returns to bed with cold following them under the coverlet. There is a brief, unfair resentment from those who stayed warm. Then the returning body is allowed back into the arrangement, because the room needs every source of heat it can get. The walls continue their slow work. Wattle and daub may hold warmth better than bare stone in some conditions, but cracks matter. Timber shrinks, plaster fails, thatch can insulate well, yet smoke, damp and age change how a roof behaves. Medieval houses are not one thing. A peasant cottage, an urban timber house, a manor chamber, and a castle lodging each make different promises, and some of those promises are lies by midnight. A bench has been angled against the lower part of the door. It is not locked there for security alone. It helps break the line of draught. A stool lies on its side near the bed because someone used it to hang a cloak from a peg and did not bother to write it. This would offend a tidy soul. A cold soul is more forgiving. The cloak makes a hanging screen, and the stool may continue its disgraceful but useful career until morning. The bed curtains darken the space around your face. A little damp from breath gathers in the cloth. This is the bargain. Trap warmth, and you also trap smell, breath, and the private evidence of too many people under too many layers. Fresh air is lovely in theory. In this bed, fresh air has been asked to wait outside. Your hand, tucked near the chest-warmed coverlet, finds a seam in the blanket. The stitching is thick where it has been mended. A household that survives winter knows repairs intimately. The patched shutter, the tied curtain ring, the wedge under the door, the chest shoved against the wall, the blanket darned where a spark once bit it. None of these fixes is grand. Together they become a climate. The fire remains hidden in ash. The room is divided into warmer and colder pockets, cloth against draught, wood against wall, chest against seam, curtain against air. Sleep settles more easily when the boundaries hold, but somewhere low beyond the curtain, near the rushes and the storage corner, another source of warmth shifts on four legs, sniffs once, and reminds the room that not every defense against cold is made of fabric. The four-legged warmth near the storage corner is not invited into the bed, but it belongs to the winter room all the same. A dog turns twice on the rushes, gives up on dignity, and drops with a sigh that sounds almost human. The sound moves through the dark in a way no draft can manage. It says that the house is not sleeping as separate creatures. It is sleeping as a pile of arrangements. Animals bring heat, and heat is persuasive. In many medieval rural households, people and livestock live closer than modern comfort usually prefers. The exact layout varies widely. Some homes have byres under the same roof, some keep animals in adjoining spaces, some separate them more clearly, and town households may have stables, yards, lofts, or pens nearby, rather than a cow breathing beside the family bed. But the basic fact remains sturdy. Animals are often part of the household economy, and in winter their bodies matter as much as their milk, eggs, wool, labour, manure, or meat. A cow gives off warmth simply by continuing to be a cow. That is not a poetic insight, it is barn physics. A large animal in an enclosed space raises the temperature nearby, especially when walls are low, openings are few, and straw bedding holds the heat of bodies. If a byre stands at one end of the house, or below a living space in some regions, the animal warmth can help soften the night above or beside it. The smell comes as part of the bargain, because history rarely gives a useful thing without handing you a bucket. You can smell the animal corner even from the bed. Warm hide, damp straw, old manure, a sour, sweet heaviness that settles lower than smoke. It is not pleasant in the way a clean linen chest is pleasant, but it is familiar. Familiar smells become less like insults and more like information. The cow is alive. The straw needs turning. The hen has settled. The dog has fleas again, almost certainly, because the dog considers this a private theological matter. The dog is nearer, because dogs make their own case for warmth. They guard, scavenge, herd, warn, and steal the best place with a confidence that crosses centuries. A small dog may be allowed closer to sleepers in some households, especially where affection and usefulness overlap. Larger working dogs remain where they are wanted and where they can be tolerated. Their fur holds heat, their bodies block drafts. Their fleas demonstrate a regrettable talent for social mobility. A hen rustles in a basket or crate near the warmer side of the room. Keeping poultry close during bitter nights can protect valuable birds from frost, foxes, or theft. A laying hen is not just an animal, it is a future egg, a little engine of food, and sometimes a very poor judge of where droppings should go. One odd winter habit, recorded in later rural customs, and likely familiar in spirit earlier, is bringing weak lambs, calves, or chilled poultry into the house when cold threatens them. The animal becomes a small emergency wrapped in straw, cloth, breath, and worry. Nobody calls it adorable at 2 a.m. when it leaks on the floor. The room makes room anyway. A lamb near the hearth is money not yet lost. A calf that survives the frost may become milk, labour, breeding, or sale. A hen that lives through winter may start laying again when days lengthen. Animals are not sentimental extras in this world. They are warmth with hooves, food with opinions, and property that can die if a door is badly shut. Archaeologists and historians do not entirely agree on whether some excavated house plans show people and livestock sharing space as closely as older reconstructions sometimes suggest. The evidence can be difficult. A drain, a sunken floor, a partition, a layer of trampled material, or the chemistry of soil may hint at animal use, but it does not always tell exactly who slept how near to whom. Regional building traditions matter. So does the century. So does poverty. The past does not arrange itself into one neat floor plan for our convenience, which is inconsiderate, though not surprising. Still, the lived logic is clear enough. If winter is severe, animals are protected because losing them can injure the whole year. A cow lost in January is not only a sad event, it can mean less milk, less manure for fields, less breeding stock, less security, less bargaining power, and a sharper hunger later. Cold reaches into the future through animals. That is why someone gets up to check the latch, even when the bed has finally become tolerable. The dog lifts its head before anyone else does. A scratch at the threshold. Maybe wind. Maybe a loose twig. Maybe nothing. The dog's ears make a decision. Then the body relaxes again, which allows the humans to believe they may continue breathing under blankets without responsibility for one more moment. A sleeping animal can calm a room. A restless one can ruin it. The animal heat is not clean heat. This must be admitted quietly. Straw must be changed, dung must be cleared, hooves make mess. Hens produce evidence of their presence with alarming efficiency. Insects travel, damp rises. The same closeness that saves warmth can carry coughs, stink, and vermin. Medieval people may not explain disease as modern medicine does, but they know that foul bedding, stagnant air, rot, and infestation are bad companions. A buyer has to be managed, not merely endured. Someone outside the bed curtains shifts and whispers a warning toward the animal corner. The hen stops fussing. The dog ignores the comment because the dog has already fulfilled its main obligation of being warm and vaguely alert. The cow, if nearby, moves its weight from one leg to another. Straw compresses. A chain or wooden fitting gives a dull sound. That sound is a winter sound too, as much as the shutter or the ember. Livestock settling while human beings try to sleep. For a poorer household, the animal's nearness may be more necessity than preference. For a better-off household, separation is easier, but even then stables, kennels, mews, barns and yards remain close parts of the domestic world. High status changes the smell. It does not abolish dependence. Horses need grooms and fodder. Hunting dogs need care. Hawks need warmth, feeding, and attention. Elite animals may live better than some humans, which is one of those facts best handled gently before bedtime. The rushes near the animal corner are darker. They have taken damp from paws and feet. The household will deal with it in the morning, or as soon as the cold permits useful movement. For now, the aim is not perfection. The aim is survival without waste. Everybody under the roof has a thermal role, whether it knows it or not. The sleeping child, the wrapped adult, the dog on the rushes, the hen in her basket, the cow beyond the partition. All of them make the house a little less empty against the frost. A small warmth moves at floor level when the dog resettles nearer the curtain. The blanket edge stirs. Someone's foot retreats instinctively from the draft the dog has brought with it, then relaxes when the warm flank presses against the outer cloth. The animal breath smells of scraps and old teeth. Not delightful, not unwelcome. The house accepts what keeps it alive, and the night continues with the soft, uneven breathing of creatures who cannot explain winter, but know exactly where the warmth is. The uneven breathing under the roof is not allowed to rule every household. In a religious house, the night belongs partly to sleep and partly to bells, and the bell is not interested in whether your feet have finally become warm. It calls through the dark with a thin authority, and the body answers before the mind has prepared a complaint. You are not lying beside a dog now, but among rows of sleepers in a dormitory, where breath and cloth and discipline make a different kind of winter arrangement. The rule of the house has its own temperature. In many Benedictine monasteries and nunneries, the night is broken by the office of matins, or night office, when the community rises for prayer in the deep hours before dawn. Exact timing varies by season, local custom, and rule, but the pattern is clear enough. Sleep is not a private possession. It is something obedience may interrupt. A hand comes out from beneath the cover and regrets it immediately. The air in the dormitory is colder than the pocket under the blanket, and the blanket is not interested in letting you go. Around you, others begin to move. Straw pallets rustle. Wooden beds creak. A cough is swallowed because coughing too much feels like making a statement. Someone's bare foot or stockinged foot meets the floor and pauses there, as if negotiating with stone. The dormitory is not a cosy retreat. It is ordered space. Beds or pallets may be arranged so the community can be supervised and roused. In some monastic houses, a lamp burns through the night, not for comfort, but for regulation and safety. Clothing for sleep is shaped by both cold and modesty. The rule of St. Benedict, written in the 6th century and influential across medieval Western monasticism, instructs monks to sleep clothed and girded, ready to rise quickly for the work of God. The details of practice change across centuries, but the idea is firm. The sleeping body remains under discipline. You pull on what must be pulled on, or tighten what was never fully removed. The clothing feels stiff, warmed in patches, cold at the edges. A belt or cord is adjusted. A cowl, cloak, or outer garment waits close by. The room smells of wool, old rushes or boards, lamp oil, and human breath held under winter rafters. No one wants to fumble loudly. A novice learns quickly that piety is not only prayer, it is knowing where your shoes are in the dark. One odd monastic detail sits in the lighting. A small night lamp, sometimes maintained in dormitories or church spaces, can be both practical and symbolic. It prevents total darkness, marks sacred vigilance, and keeps people from colliding with furniture while pursuing holiness, which is considerate of all involved. Oil is not free, though. A lamp that burns all night means supplies, accounts, and someone responsible for trimming and tending. Even devotion has a fuel budget. The cold corridor waits between the dormitory and the church or chapel. You move with the others, not in cheerful procession, but in trained quiet. The feet know the path. The hand knows the wall. The body knows that shivering too visibly is not forbidden, perhaps, but not admired. Winter turns humility into a physical exercise. A younger monk or nun may feel the cold like a rebuke. An older one may simply move more slowly and waste no feeling on what cannot be warmed by complaint. Scholars continue to disagree about how closely everyday monastic sleep followed written rules in every house. Because rules preserve ideals, visitations preserve corrections, and account books preserve expenses more readily than the ordinary half-awake shuffle of a freezing community. Some houses were strict, some were lax. Some were wealthy enough to soften hardship. Some struggled with leaking roofs, thin bedding, and poor fuel. The written rule can say one thing, while the December floor adds its own commentary. In the church, the cold is broader. Stone holds the night with a steady grip. Breath appears and vanishes in front of faces when the air is hard enough. Candles or lamps mark the choir stalls. Wood under the hand is polished by use and cold to the first touch. You take your place, not because you are comfortable, but because place is part of the prayer. Rank, age, office, and habit decide where bodies stand, sit, bow, and rise. The chant begins low, not dramatic, not made for a hall full of microphones and reverent tourists. It is work done with the voice in cold air, a measured offering when the body would rather be horizontal. Psalms, readings, responses. The night is divided by words older than the frost outside. The mouth shapes Latin, perhaps confidently, perhaps with the careful obedience of someone still learning. Cold changes singing. It tightens the throat. It makes the breath shorter. It reminds you that the soul's business must pass through lungs. The office can be beautiful, but beauty does not cancel numb toes. A sleeve is pulled lower between verses. Hands fold inside the opposite sleeves, a practical gesture as much as a devotional one. The habit itself becomes shelter. Wool around the body, hood near the head, sleeves as pockets for fingers. Monastic clothing is often standardized by rule and custom, but within that sameness are small tactics. How to hold the hands, where to tuck the chin, when to shift weight without appearing restless. A sleepy mind begins to drift during a reading. The words continue. The body sways almost imperceptibly. Someone nearby sniffs once, quietly. The candle flame leans when a door admits a thread of air. You are awake because the bell has said so, and the bell speaks on behalf of a life chosen, promised, or sometimes placed upon a child by family ambition. Not every person in a monastery arrived by the same path. Some came in devotion, some were offered young. Some found security, learning, food, or status inside the walls. Cold does not ask which reason brought you here. When the office ends, the return is another test. The bed left behind has cooled. That is the cruelty of interrupted sleep. The hollow made by your body has lost its stored warmth, and the blanket feels newly suspicious. No household sleeper likes leaving the bed in winter, but the monastic sleeper may do it by design, night after night, because the rhythm of prayer outranks the rhythm of comfort. Back in the dormitory, people settle with quiet haste. The pallet receives you less kindly than before. The linen is cold again where the knee enters. The blanket must be pulled, tucked, persuaded back around the shoulders. A cough moves down the row and stops. The night lamp burns on, small and stubborn. Its light catches the edge of a wooden bed, a folded garment, a face already turning away. The discipline of the house does not keep anyone magically warm. It gives order to cold. It tells the body when to rise, where to stand, when to lie down again, and how to endure without making the whole night about endurance. Under the blanket, your feet search for the warmer hollow that no longer exists. Slowly, grudgingly, the bed begins its work again, while beyond the dormitory wall, the church holds the last vibration of the chant like a thread not yet broken. The thread of chant fades behind stone, but stone does not let go of cold. It keeps it. It stores it with the same quiet confidence that a chest stores linen or a lord stores debts. In a castle chamber, a manor lodging, or the private room of a wealthy household, you may expect winter to behave better. There are servants, hangings, braziers, carved beds, metal fittings, and textiles with names worth writing down. There is status. There is order. There is also a wall that feels as though it has been carved from December itself. High rank changes the battle with cold, but it does not end it. Medieval castles are built for defence, command, storage, display, and control as much as for comfort. Thick stone walls protect against enemies and fire. They also absorb and radiate cold with a patience that feels personal. The Great Hall may hold a large hearth, and a lord's chamber may have a fireplace, especially in later medieval buildings, but heat still travels poorly through large spaces and tall rooms. If the fire is at one end, the other end is free to remain rude. You stand near the chamber wall and do not lean on it. That is the first lesson. Stone punishes leaning. A hanging has been placed over part of the wall, perhaps a woven tapestry or a painted cloth, and the air before it feels less severe. It may show a hunt, a garden, a saint, a heraldic beast, or some decorative pattern meant to impress visitors during the day. At night, its best quality is that it does not behave like bare stone. A servant lifts a brazier with great care. Charcoal glows inside, giving a concentrated heat that can be moved where needed. Braziers are useful in chambers, halls, and tents, but they are not harmless. Poor ventilation can make fumes dangerous. Sparks can mark flooring or cloth. Someone must tend, watch, carry, and place them correctly. Comfort at this rank often means another person stays alert, so you can appear less concerned. The bed is larger than a cottage bed and better dressed. It may have a canopy, curtains, feather mattress, linen sheets, wool blankets, fur coverlets, and embroidered textiles that have travelled through trade, marriage, inheritance, or conquest. A high-status bed can be one of the most valuable objects in the room. Inventories from noble households often list bedding in careful detail: mattresses, bolsters, blankets, quilts, curtains, testers, coverlets, and cloths of varying quality. Sleep here is surrounded by wealth that can be counted. But wealth must still be warmed. The sheet is fine and still cold at first touch. The fur is costly and still must be arranged correctly. A servant may warm the bed before you enter it, or shake the bedding, Draw the curtains, place a warmed cloth near the foot, and remove any chill that can be removed by labour. The great difference is not that noble bodies never feel winter, it is that other bodies are employed to soften winter before it reaches them. This has its own awkwardness. You do not simply crawl into bed as an unobserved creature. In a high-ranking household, bedtime can be public in degrees. Attendants may assist with undressing, clothing, washing, warming, and guarding. A lord, lady, child of rank, guest, or favoured official sleeps with more privacy than a servant in the hall, but not with the sealed solitude modern people often imagine as normal. Curtains help, doors help, rank helps. Still, status is witnessed. Even the act of being comfortable can require an audience. A chamber servant brings a covered warming pan, or perhaps, depending on period and region, a heated stone or wrapped brick instead. The metal bed warming pan, with hot coals placed inside and a long handle, becomes more familiar in later medieval and early modern Europe, especially in wealthier households. Its purpose is obvious: slide heat between sheets before the body enters. Its danger is also obvious. A coal does not care how expensive the linen is. A careless warming pan can scorch cloth, and a scorched bed announces incompetence with a smell no herald can improve. Nobody entirely agrees on whether bed warming pans were common in the late medieval period outside richer households, because surviving examples and images are patchy, and the terminology in records can be slippery. Some references may mean one kind of heater, some another. The basic practice of warming beds is certain enough. The exact spread of each device is less cooperative. The chamber has a fireplace rather than an open central hearth, and that is a real advantage. Chimneys and wall fireplaces become increasingly important in medieval elite architecture, allowing more private rooms to be heated and smoke to be carried away more efficiently. Yet a fireplace heats what faces it. The back remains cold, the floor remains cold, the corners remain cold. Heat is directional, almost political. It favours those placed nearest. You sit on a bench near the fire while an attendant handles the last tasks. The bench is cushioned, perhaps, but the cushion has cooled. A cushion is not a miracle. It is only cloth and filling with better manners than bare wood. Your outer garment is removed and handed away. Your night clothing is clean. Your head is covered. Your feet are warmed if enough care is taken. A person of lower rank may kneel or bend to handle what you would rather not handle yourself. That kind of comfort carries its own chill. The room is warmer because someone else crossed it. The bed is ready because someone else touched the cold linen first. The brazier glows because someone else brought charcoal. A servant sleeping later in a colder corner may know the noble bed's warmth better than the noble sleeper does, at least for the few moments spent preparing it. In the hall below, others sleep differently. Retainers, household officers, guards, pages, maids, grooms and lower servants occupy benches, pallets, truckle beds, side rooms, lofts, or spaces assigned by rank and necessity. A castle is a living organism of unequal temperatures. Near the Lord's chamber, fabrics thicken. Near the outer service areas, drafts sharpen. A great hall can hold many bodies and a great fire, but once the hall fire falls, the vastness that looked impressive by day becomes a large problem with rafters. A curious little high-status solution appears in portable textiles. Nobles travel with bedding, hangings, cushions, and sometimes even collapsible beds or parts of bed furniture. Comfort is not assumed to be waiting at each stop, it must be carried. A household on the move is a caravan of fabric, vessels, chests, clothes, documents, food, and sleeping gear. The richer you are, the more your warmth has handles. Outside the chamber, a guard stamps a foot. The sound travels through the floor or corridor, dull and brief. Not all cold is domestic. Some men stand watch in it, or keep fires at gates, or sleep in short turns with cloaks wrapped tight. The Lord's wall is defended by people whose own fingers may be numb. A castle protects many bodies, but it does not warm them equally. At last, the bed curtains close. The chamber becomes smaller. Firelight presses through the fabric in a low, broken glow. The bed smells of clean linen, fur, wool, warmed cloth, and the faint metal tang left by a brazier carried too near. The first shock of the sheet is gentler than in a poor home, but it is still there. Your knees draw up. The body waits for the expensive layers to become useful. The servant steps back. The fire is adjusted. The chamber door is checked. A noble sleeper is left inside a careful nest of wealth, labour, cloth and stone, while just beyond the bed curtain, the room keeps its colder corners, and beyond the room, the castle holds a winter that rank can delay, redirect and dress beautifully, but never wholly dismiss. Beyond the dressed stone and watched doors, the same winter lowers itself onto smaller roofs, where no one carries warmth in chests, unless the chest is also holding the household's best shirt, a few folded cloths, and perhaps a loaf hidden from mice. The cold does not arrive politely because the house is poor. It comes in through thatch, under the door, along the wall, and sometimes through the smoke hole that has spent the whole evening pretending to be ventilation. You crouch inside a low cottage, where standing upright is a privilege granted only in the middle. The roof presses the room downward. That can be useful. A smaller space is easier to warm than a hall, and a low ceiling keeps heat from escaping too far above the heads of the people who need it. The walls may be wattle and daub, timber, turf, stone, or some regional mixture of what land, law, and labour allow. The floor is packed earth, perhaps strewn with rushes, straw, or bracken where it can be spared. The hearth sits near the centre or against a wall, depending on the house and period, and it has worked all day. It has cooked pottage, it has dried a sleeve, it has smoked the rafters, it has made everyone's eyes water at least once. A chimney would be welcome, but many humbler medieval homes rely on a smoke hole or simple opening for smoke to escape. Some smoke escapes, some remains to season the household like badly stored ham. The thatch above holds warmth well when it is sound. It also holds smoke, soot, insects, old dust, and the private history of many fires. A roof of straw, reed, turf or thatch is not a backward joke. It is skilled, local building. It can insulate beautifully. It can also leak, rot, catch fire, shelter vermin, and require more attention than a person with cold hands would like to give. Competence does not mean ease. Near the wall, stored food changes the room. A sack of grain, a basket of turnips, dried peas, onions, apples if the household is lucky, salted meat if luck has been especially well behaved. All of it takes space and must be protected from damp and animals. Winter sleep happens beside food, because food cannot be trusted outside and must not be lost. A poor household's pantry may be the same room where children lie down. Hunger sleeps near the bed, not as a dramatic threat every night, but as a daily calculation with a lid on it. The mainstream fact is plain, in the hearth smoke and storage corner. Most medieval Europeans live in rural communities, and peasant households depend heavily on seasonal labour, stored harvest, common rights, rents, dues, and local resources. Winter is not only cold weather, it is the season when autumn's work is tested. If grain stores are low, if fuel is scarce, if an animal falls ill, the bed feels colder before the blanket even touches you. A wooden bowl is set upside down to keep mice from it. A knife is placed where a hand can find it. A pot is covered. The door bar is checked twice, because a cottage door is not simply an entrance, it is a heat leak, a security problem, and a thing the wind would like to discuss all night. A child has been told not to open it again. The child asks why. Everyone in the room considers this a failure of education. One small, odd defence against drafts is not a grand invention at all. A bundled piece of straw, cloth, or old matting pushed along the base of the door. It is the ancestor of every rolled towel placed at the foot of a modern bedroom door during a cold snap. The medieval version is less charming, smells more of floor, and may be moved by a dog who believes it has discovered bedding. Still, it works. Air meets an obstacle and loses some of its confidence. Interpretations continue to differ over whether some excavated rural houses were consistently divided between humans and animals, or used in more flexible ways by season and need. A post hole, a hearth, a drain, or a trampled floor layer can suggest arrangement, but winter habits may shift faster than archaeology can catch. A pen that stands apart in mild weather may feel much too far away in a hard frost. People do not always live according to the neat diagram drawn after their house is gone. Inside, space is made by moving things, not by having rooms waiting empty. A stool is set aside. A spinning distaff leans near the wall. A basket is lifted onto a chest so a pallet can be laid down. Children are placed where they will not roll toward the hearth. An older person takes the spot that keeps away the worst draught, or receives it depending on status, affection, and how tired everyone else is. Peasant comfort is often a matter of exact inches. The bedding may be simpler than in a wealthy chamber, but it is not thoughtless. Straw beneath, cloth above. Cloaks where needed, old garments over feet. Perhaps a sheepskin if the household has one. Perhaps nothing so generous. The family understands where the house loses heat. The bed or pallet is not placed by accident. The wall that sweats damp is avoided. The side nearer the door is given to someone who can bear it, or someone who lacks the power to refuse. The floor steals warmth steadily. Earth seems quiet, but in winter it is busy. If you lie too close to it, with too little beneath you, the cold rises through hip and shoulder. Straw helps because it lifts the body and traps air. A hurdle, boards, a low frame, or a thick bundle of bedding helps more. A poor person sleeping directly on a thin pallet is not merely less comfortable. They are losing heat into the ground all night. The cottage has a sound different from the castle chamber. Less echo, more small noises. Thatch shifting, ash settling. A mouse making a bold career decision. Someone breathing through a blocked nose. A pot contracting as it cools. The wind presses the wall and finds no grand corridor, only a patched seam, a shutter, a hanging cloak, a lump of rag, and the stubborn dark shape of people who know exactly what must not be wasted. No one here mistakes endurance for romance. A hard winter can mean failed travel, dead livestock, frozen mills, and hunger that worsens before spring. Yet the cottage is not only misery, it is skill under pressure. Someone knows how to bank the fire with very little fuel. Someone knows which child kicks off covers. Someone has tucked the door draft. Someone has kept seed grain apart from eating grain, at least for now, though the thought of it sits heavily in the room. The hearth gives one muted glow beneath ash. The family draws in. Knees fold, shoulders overlap. A cloak becomes a blanket becomes a wall becomes a promise that the wind will not have everything. The cottage does not defeat the cold any more than the castle does. It makes a smaller argument, with fewer materials and more consequence. Under the low roof, close to grain sacks, patched cloth, banked embers, and the slow breathing of people who must rise before the frost has softened, the night gathers itself against the door and waits for any mistake. The mistake waits at the door, but sometimes it waits on the road before you ever reach a door at all. Winter travel is a wager made with feet, weather, daylight, and the mood of whoever owns the next hearth. By the time you arrive at an inn, your cloak has taken on the cold like a second lining, and your shoes have learned every rut between the last village and this one. The house ahead is not beautiful. Beauty is not what you are looking for. You are looking for smoke from a roof vent, a lantern or rushlight near the entrance, the sound of voices, the smell of ale, horse, damp wool, and something hot enough to be called food by a merciful person. The yard is churned hard where hooves and cartwheels have frozen the mud into ridges. A horse stamps near the stable. Somewhere behind a wall, a man coughs as if his lungs are filing a complaint. You enter with the others because arriving alone in deep winter is already bad enough without standing politely outside. Medieval inns and taverns vary enormously, from rough alehouses to established urban inns with stabling, chambers, food, drink, and space for merchants, pilgrims, messengers, carriers, clerks, and people who claim to be more respectable than their boots suggest. Hospitality is business, not charity, though charity may still hover nearby in monasteries, hospitals, and parish customs for the poor or the devout traveller. At the threshold, warmth hits first, then smell. Not clean warmth, useful warmth. Wet cloaks steam, leather softens. Stable air follows men into the room and refuses to apologize. The fire is larger than a cottage fire, because an inn lives by gathering bodies and coin. A pot hangs or sits close enough to tempt hope. Ale is drawn, bread is cut. A bench is cleared only after someone decides you are worth seating. Payment matters before comfort. A coin is counted into a palm or onto a board. You may pay for ale, food, stabling, a place by the fire, bedding, or a shared bed, depending on the inn and your means. In many places, travellers commonly share sleeping spaces, and private chambers cost more. The mainstream fact is simple and slightly humbling. Medieval travel often means sleeping among strangers, because space, bedding, and fuel are costly, and an innkeeper sells access to them piece by piece. Your cloak is taken only if you trust the room, which you do not fully. It stays near you, because a cloak is warmth, status, weatherproofing, blanket, and personal wall. A wet cloak is miserable, but a stolen cloak is worse. You spread one edge near the fire, careful not to let it scorch, careful not to let another traveller's boot claim it as floor. The steam rising from it smells of rain, horse, road dust, and your own tired shoulders. There is a small rule at work here. Do not look too helpless. A tired traveller must seem weary enough to deserve ordinary treatment, but not so lost that every thief in the room begins making plans. You keep your purse under clothing or beneath a belt. You place a bundle under your knee. You eat with one hand while the other keeps contact with what matters. Sleep in an inn begins long before lying down. It begins with deciding what can be left unattended, which is a short list. A lesser-known travel habit appears in the bedding itself. Some travellers carry a bedroll, cloak, or blanket when they can, partly to avoid paying for better bedding, and partly because inn bedding may come with previous occupants, in the smallest and most active sense. Fleas and lice are not a charming rustic detail when you must lie still until morning. A person with a spare cloth can wrap themselves against both cold and company. It is not a private room, it is a portable boundary. Historians still argue whether complaints about filthy inns and thieving hosts reflect ordinary conditions or the louder voices of anxious travellers, moralists and officials who had reasons to exaggerate disorder. Legal records preserve theft because theft becomes a case. Satisfied sleepers rarely leave testimony saying, "The bed was crowded but acceptable, and only one flea seemed ambitious." The evidence leans toward trouble because trouble writes itself down. Still, caution is sensible. The innkeeper watches the room with practiced eyes. Hosts are responsible in many towns for maintaining order, reporting suspicious guests, and preventing obvious trouble, though enforcement shifts by place and century. A stranger is not just a customer. A stranger can bring news, coin, disease, debt, stolen goods, or a fight that breaks furniture. You are being judged even as you warm your fingers around a cup. The drink helps. Ale in winter is not a cosy decoration. It is calories, liquid, habit, and sometimes safer than questionable water, though that claim must not be made too neatly. People drink water too, and medieval drinking habits vary, but ale belongs firmly in the daily and social world of many regions. The cup warms your hand if it has been near the fire. The first swallow is sour, malty, and deeply welcome because the road has made even ordinary ale seem generous. When sleep is arranged, it is arranged with economy. A host or servant points, gestures, or leads. The bed may be upstairs, in a chamber, in a loft, in a side room, or on a pallet in a common space. The stair is narrow. Your knees object. The air cools as you leave the main fire. A candle or rushlight carries a small, uncertain glow, and every shadow seems to contain someone else's luggage. The bed is not yours. That is the main point. It may already hold one person, or two. You are given the outer space because you arrived later, or paid less, or failed to look important enough. The sheet, if present, has been warmed by strangers. This is both comforting and horrifying, a rare achievement. You keep some clothing on. You place your bundle beneath your head or inside the curve of your arm. Shoes stay near enough to find in the dark. A knife, if carried, is not waved about, because no one relaxes beside a theatrical fool. The damp cloak becomes a problem. If left near the fire, it may dry. If kept with you, it warms you badly but guards your property. You compromise, as medieval travellers often do, by keeping the most valuable and useful parts close and surrendering only what cannot be stolen without someone noticing. The blanket over you smells of old wool, smoke, and several people who also had difficult roads. Someone snores before you have settled, another mutters in a dream. The mattress dips toward the middle. A stranger's elbow briefly enters your ribs, withdraws, then returns with the confidence of a tax collector. You hold your place. Warmth collects faster with bodies packed close, and irritation must be weighed against frost. On the road, dignity is one more thing carried until it becomes too heavy. Below, the common room quiets in layers. A last cup is set down. A horse shifts in the stable. Coins are counted somewhere by a person who trusts arithmetic more than guests. The inn holds travellers the way a net holds fish. Close, restless, necessary, not entirely comfortable. You lie awake just long enough to keep one hand over your bundle, while the borrowed warmth of strangers seeps through the bedding and the road's cold begins to leave your legs, one slow inch at a time. The road's cold leaves your legs slowly, but there are nights when bodies alone are not enough, and people begin to recruit objects into the work of warmth. Not grand objects, not inventions with polished names. A stone, a brick, a pan, a wrapped cloth, a cap pulled low, a pair of old stockings that has lost the right to be seen in daylight but still serves bravely in the dark. The simplest trick is the heated stone. It begins near the hearth, where a smooth stone or brick is placed close enough to take warmth, but not so close that it cracks or scorches its wrapping. The stone is not thrown into the bed like some heroic lump from a battlefield. It is handled with care. Too hot, and it can burn cloth or skin. Too cool, and it is only a stone with ambition. The useful one sits in the hand with a deep, steady heat, the kind that does not flare but stays. A cloth goes around it, an old rag, a scrap of wool, a worn piece of linen, anything that can protect the skin while letting warmth through. Then it is carried to the bed and placed near the feet, or tucked where the sleeper needs it most. The first contact is startling. The toes uncurl toward it like small animals approaching a fire. A warm stone at the foot of a bed can change the whole shape of the night. This practice is not unique to the Middle Ages, and it lasts long after them. Heated stones, bricks, tiles, and later ceramic or metal foot warmers appear across many cold climates because the principle is too sensible to ignore. Store heat in a dense object, wrap it, carry it where the fire cannot go, let it release warmth slowly under the covers. It is the portable hearth, reduced to the size of a loaf. There is a cautious routine to it. The stone must be dry, because trapped moisture and sudden heat can make some stones fracture. Nobody needs a small explosion in the hearth just as the household prepares for sleep. Soapstone, brick, tile, and other heat-holding materials may serve better than random wet stones dragged from a yard. In ordinary homes, though, people use what they know, what local experience approves, and what has not betrayed them yet. The bed accepts the stone gratefully, if a bed can be said to have opinions. The blanket above it forms a tent of warmth over the feet. The heat does not reach the shoulders, not at first. But warm feet make the rest of the body more willing to believe in civilization. The person nearest the stone becomes suddenly popular. A second foot approaches from the side. A small dispute begins without words. Other tricks follow the same idea. A cloth may be warmed by the fire and tucked into the bed before lying down. A cloak may be held close to the hearth, then pulled around the shoulders. Stockings can be warmed in the hands or near embers. A cap can be set under the blanket before being worn, so it does not greet the head like a damp little accusation. Warmth is gathered in fragments and moved quickly before it escapes. A bed-warming pan belongs to households with more equipment. It has a covered metal pan and a long handle, and it carries hot coals between the sheets. In later medieval and early modern homes, especially among those with means, such pans become familiar winter tools. The servant slides the pan back and forth under the bedding, never letting it rest long enough to burn the linen. The motion is smooth if the servant is skilled, and terrifying if not. A scorched sheet is not merely damage. It is evidence. The surviving evidence refuses to settle the question of how widely bed-warming pans were used by ordinary people in the later Middle Ages, partly because objects survive unevenly, and words in inventories can blur similar devices together. A warming pan in one record may not always mean the same thing in another. Heated stones, wrapped bricks and warmed cloths leave even fewer clear traces. They work, then vanish back into the domestic background, too useful and too plain to become famous. Another small device is the foot warmer, more common in later periods but built on older habits of portable heat. A little box, sometimes metal-lined, sometimes wooden with a container for embers, can warm feet during sitting, travel, church attendance, or bed preparation. In cold churches, women and older people especially may use portable warmers in later centuries. Medieval examples are harder to prove broadly, but the desire behind them is timeless and very easy to understand when a stone floor has taken an interest in your bones. Nightcaps are less dramatic and more dependable. They do not store heat like a stone, but they stop heat from escaping. A cap can be linen, wool, felted cloth, or a wrapped kerchief. It may look ridiculous. This is not a serious objection in a room where everyone is already wearing survival as sleepwear. The cap keeps the ears and scalp covered. It also helps a sleeper stay under the blankets without pulling them over the face and breathing damp into the bedding all night. There are small tricks with breath too, though no one frames them as science. You tuck the chin. You turn the face away from the curtain gap. You pull the blanket to the mouth, then lower it slightly because damp breath chills the cloth if trapped too closely. The body experiments. It learns which position keeps the nose tolerable without wetting the linen. The past contains many forms of knowledge that never become a formal rule because they are learned by being cold once too often. Layering has its own order. A cloak over a blanket works better if the cloak lies flat. A garment bunched under the ribs creates a lump that will become an enemy by midnight. A sheepskin at the feet may be better than at the chest if the draft comes low. A dry straw pad beneath the hips matters more than a fine cover above if the ground steals heat from below. People who live with cold understand that warmth leaks in directions, and each direction must be answered differently. There is also the trick of timing. Enter the bed before every layer has gone cold. Do not stand too long after undressing. Do not open the door once the bedding is warm. Do not drink so much ale that the night requires a journey to the chamber pot or yard. This last piece of advice is widely known, often ignored, and punished without mercy. The warm bed is a treaty. Leaving it breaks negotiations. A warmed object changes the mood in the bed, not into luxury, into relief. The stone at your feet lends its heat slowly, and the whole lower half of the blanket becomes less hostile. The child nearest it stops shifting. An older person's ankles ease. A traveller, if lucky enough to have a warmed brick wrapped in cloth, keeps one hand near it as though it might be stolen by a person of poor character and cold toes. The fire outside remains banked. The stone inside the bed grows less hot minute by minute, but by then the bedding has learned what to do with the borrowed warmth. Wool holds it. Straw slows its escape. The curtain keeps it close. Your feet, finally persuaded, stop being the centre of all thought. The wrapped stone sits like a small, silent servant under the coverlet, doing its plain work without complaint, while the night presses at the shutters and finds, for once, that something warm has arrived ahead of it. The warm thing under the coverlet arrives ahead of the night, but it does not arrive equally for everyone. The strongest sleeper can curl around the heat, keep the blanket edge pinned, and let the body do its work. A child cannot always manage that. An old person may not make enough warmth quickly enough. Someone sick may lie still in a way that looks peaceful from the doorway and becomes worrying if the room is cold and the fire has sunk too low. Winter sleep is hardest on the bodies that cannot bargain well. A baby is kept close, not because medieval families are sentimental in some simple painted way, but because a small body loses heat quickly. The infant's head is covered, cloth is wrapped snugly. The mother or another caregiver keeps the child near the warmth of an adult body, especially when the room itself cannot be trusted. Swaddling is common in medieval Europe, though its exact forms and meanings vary by place, class, and period. It keeps limbs still, protects the baby, and makes carrying easier. In winter, it also turns a restless little body into a wrapped bundle that can hold heat more steadily. The bundle still must breathe, feed, and stay dry enough. That last part is not a small matter. Wet cloth in deep cold is dangerous. A baby's wrappings have to be changed when soiled, even when every change lets cold air into the layers. Someone must take the child from warmth, loosen cloth, clean as best the household can manage, replace the wrapping, and return the baby near a warmer body before the small feet chill. There is no convenient pause button for winter care. A little warmed stone may be placed near, not against, the baby's bedding. Careful hands know the difference. Heat helps. Heat can also harm if it is too close, too hot, or badly wrapped. The trick is distance, cloth, and watching. Much of medieval survival is not heroic. It is someone half asleep checking whether a wrapped object has cooled, or whether a child's cheek feels wrong. The elderly sleeper has a different problem. Cold enters slowly and leaves slowly. Fingers stiffen, knees resist bending. Getting out of bed to tend a pot, answer nature, check a latch, or help a child can cost far more than it costs a younger person. If the household has any mercy and enough space, the older body is placed away from the worst draught, perhaps nearer the warmer middle of the bed or closer to the hearth before sleep. If the household has too little mercy, too little space, or too many needs, the old person takes what place is given. The mainstream fact is stark but useful to hold carefully. Medieval life expectancy at birth is lowered greatly by high infant and child mortality, but many people who survive childhood can live into older age. Old age exists, and it exists under blankets, beside hearths, in cold rooms, with bodies that require more time, more fuel, and more patience. The past is not made only of the young and dead. It is full of older people managing stairs, smoke, stiff joints, thin shoes, and family dependence. Illness changes the bed again. A feverish person may sweat, then chill. A cough can keep others awake and make shared warmth feel risky as well as necessary. A person weakened by hunger or long work may not warm the bedding properly. The sick room, if there is a separate one, belongs more to wealth than to ordinary life. In many households, sickness lies where everyone else must still cook, sleep, mend, whisper, and pass around the same limited heat. A cup is held to cracked lips. It may be warm ale, broth, posset-like mixtures in later periods, herbal drink, or simply warmed water if available. Medieval medicine understands warmth and cold through inherited ideas from ancient and medieval humoral theory, where balance in the body matters deeply. Physicians, when available, may speak of hot, cold, moist, and dry qualities. Ordinary caregivers may use less formal words and better timing. Warm the cloth. Keep the draft off. Do not let the patient lie in damp bedding. Bring the cup before the shivering starts again. One odd protective measure is the bed cradle, though more familiar from later centuries and medical contexts, a wooden frame placed over part of a bed to keep heavy covers from pressing on sore limbs while still holding warmth around the patient. Earlier households may improvise with hoops, supports, or careful draping when a limb, wound, swelling, or painful joint cannot bear weight. The object matters because too many blankets can both save and trouble a weak body. Warmth has weight, and weight is not always kind. Modern scholarship still has not quite resolved whether medieval people understood cold exposure as a direct killer in the same categories we use now, because their medical language frames danger differently. They may not describe hypothermia as a modern doctor would, but records, remedies, sermons, household advice, and plain practice show real concern about chill, damp, weakness, and winter mortality. The explanation differs. The fear is recognizable. The poorest suffer most when the margin fails. Thin bedding, little fuel, poor food, damp shelter, and sickness reinforce one another. Cold sleep after a day without enough food is different from cold sleep after a solid meal. The body needs fuel inside as well as wood outside. Pottage, bread, ale, cheese, peas, bacon if there is any, even a small hot drink before bed. All of it matters because a body trying to warm itself must have something to burn. A hungry child does not sleep warmly. They curl tighter, wake more often, and steal heat without meaning to. The caregiver may pull them close and give up the warmer side of the coverlet. A servant may be too low in the household to ask for more bedding. A widow managing a small home may choose between keeping fuel for morning or burning more now for someone coughing under a cloak. These are not grand decisions. That is why they are cruel. They fit inside a room. The chamber pot waits nearby because cold can make distance dangerous. For a weak person, crossing the floor may be too much. The pot itself is cold to the touch, humiliatingly practical and necessary. If someone needs help, the household must supply it with as much privacy as the room permits. Here, tenderness is often disguised as efficiency. A hand steadies an elbow, a blanket is held up, a cup is moved away from the edge. No speech is needed when speech would embarrass everyone. The wrapped stone at the foot of the bed has cooled. It is still warmer than the sheet around it, but the strong glow is gone. An old hand finds it anyway and keeps it near the ankles. The baby stirs, is lifted, settled, and tucked again. The sick person breathes unevenly, then steadier. Someone listens a little longer than comfort requires. The night has become watchful rather than merely cold. Every layer, ember, body, and object now has a different value because some sleepers cannot make their own safety. The room holds its breath around them, not dramatically, just carefully. A cap is adjusted over a small ear. A blanket is eased away from a sore knee. The last warm corner of the stone is turned toward the feet that need it most, while the ash-covered hearth waits for the first grey light and the hand that must find out whether enough heat remains. The hand reaches before the eyes fully open. It moves from under the blanket into the cold room with the caution of someone testing water that may not forgive them. The air bites the wrist. The fingers search beyond the bed edge, past the curtain, past the last pocket of shared warmth, toward the place where the hearth should still be hiding its red centre under ash. For a moment, there is only grey. Not daylight yet, not darkness either. That thin winter colour that makes every object look as if it has been made from old bone and tired wood. The room has changed while everyone slept. Breath has dampened cloth. Rushes have stiffened near the door. The shutter seam is pale with frost. A shoe left too far from the hearth has hardened into a shape that will not welcome a foot. The ash is touched with the poker. Nothing answers at first. Then, under the grey powder, a dull red point appears. Small, almost insulting. Absolutely precious. This is the victory no chronicle bothers to celebrate. Not a battle won, not a king crowned, not a cathedral raised, but a coal still alive after the coldest part of the night. The person at the hearth bends closer, shields the ember, and feeds it a scrap of tinder saved for this exact moment. Dry tow, shaved wood, a twist of straw, or a sliver of kindling catches only if the ember is treated gently. Too much breath scatters ash. Too little leaves the coal sulking. The first little flame is coaxed, not commanded. Medieval households often preserve fire overnight when they can, because relighting from scratch costs time, tinder, and effort. Flint and steel can make sparks, but sparks need dry material and patient hands. In a frozen morning, patience is easier to praise than practice. The mainstream fact is clear in this crouched body by the hearth. Survival through winter depends on routine skill as much as on shelter. Warmth is not a possession. It is a chain of actions that cannot break too many times. Behind you, the bed begins to loosen its grip. Someone shifts under the blanket, unwilling to leave the hollow made by their own body. A child rolls toward the warm place where an adult had been. The old person keeps still a little longer, saving movement until the fire proves itself. The sick sleeper is checked without ceremony. a hand near the cheek, a blanket tucked again. The room wakes in layers, because waking all at once would waste courage. The flame catches. It is thin and yellow at first. A second scrap is added, then a twig, then a small piece of wood that has been kept dry by being hidden from both damp and children. The fire grows from a secret into a statement. Smoke begins again, and the roof accepts its morning portion. Eyes sting. Nobody thanks the smoke, but everyone accepts the heat beneath it. Frozen clothing must be persuaded back into service. A tunic near the wall is cold enough to make the skin shrink from it. Stockings are checked for damp. Shoes are turned toward the fire, but not too near. A cloak is shaken, and the stiff hem cracks softly where frost has gathered overnight from breath, damp, or a brush against the door. The body that was almost warm under covers must now trade that warmth for movement, which feels like a poor bargain until hunger reminds everyone that staying in bed produces no pottage. A small winter trick appears at the water bucket. A thin skin of ice may have formed across the top if the room fell hard enough in the night. It is broken with a wooden spoon, a knife handle, or knuckles if someone is unwise and awake enough to regret it. The ice disc is lifted out and set aside, sometimes used to cool nothing at all, because the morning has already made its point. In severe cold, water kept indoors can still freeze. That small fact tells more about the room than any thermometer could. The material record complicates the question of just how often medieval indoor water froze in ordinary homes across different regions, because accounts mention extreme events more readily than normal mornings. Chronicles record great freezes. Household records note fuel, repairs, illness, and losses. Archaeology shows buildings, hearths, and soot. But the exact number of dawns when someone broke ice from a bucket beside the bed remains beyond reach. The coldest mornings survive best in complaint, not in measurement. The door is opened only when necessary. A draft enters with the confidence of a tax collector. Outside, the yard has hardened. Footprints from yesterday sit frozen in place. The world is pale along edges: thatch, fence, cartwheel, dung heap, bucket rim. Smoke from another roof rises slowly, which means another household has also won its small morning contest. A neighbour's cough carries. A rooster, if there is one, sounds less triumphant than contractually obliged. Inside, the bed is not abandoned carelessly. The blanket is folded enough to air, but not enough to lose every bit of warmth. Straw is shaken where damp has gathered. A bed cover is lifted away from the wall so it does not drink the cold plaster all day. If there is sun later, bedding may be taken outside to air, though in hard winter the sun can look sincere and still do very little. Frost is not fooled by brightness. The household moves around the rekindled fire. Pottage is stirred or reheated. Bread is cut with hands that move slowly at first. Ale, broth, or warmed water may make the throat more willing. The body that survived the night now needs fuel from inside. Food is warmth delayed, turned by labour into heat that can walk, carry, mend, chop, pray, milk, sweep, and endure another day. The old stone from the foot of the bed lies cold now, harmless and dull. It has spent its usefulness and become only an object again. Someone picks it up and sets it near the hearth for later, because later is always arriving in winter. The same stone may be warmed tonight, wrapped tonight, tucked near the feet tonight. Medieval survival often works by repetition, but not the empty kind, the meaningful kind. The kind where a task is done again because yesterday's care made today possible. A sleeve is pulled down over the wrist, a cap is tightened. The door opens briefly for someone to fetch wood, water, or news of the weather. Cold rushes in, heat rushes out. A complaint rises and is ignored because the task still has to happen. The fire is stronger now, though not generous. Its warmth touches faces, bowls, fingers, and the underside of the pot. The bed behind you holds the flattened shapes of bodies that made their own weather in the dark. By pale morning, the answer to the great cold is not one invention. It is not one blanket, one fireplace, one clever trick, one heroic tolerance. It is straw, wool, linen, ash, curtains, bodies, animals, fuel, caps, stones, shutters, food, habit, and the stubborn knowledge of where every small warmth goes. People sleep through the coldest winters because they do not leave sleep to chance. They prepare the room, the bed, the fire, the body, and one another. And then they do it again when the next night begins forming at the edge of the day. And now the morning can soften in your mind. The frost remains outside the shutter, but it no longer needs your attention. The fire has taken. The blanket lies folded. The stone rests by the hearth, waiting without hurry. The bowl warms 2 hands, then 1, then none, as it is set aside. The room is still poor in light, but it has passed through the worst of the dark. Breath comes more easily. The small noises of winter become ordinary again. Wood settling, cloth moving, a shoe being worked gently onto a foot, the low sound of someone stirring food in a pot. Nothing here is grand. Nothing needs to be. The night was survived by small things doing small work in the right order. Let the cold move farther away now. Let the shutter, the curtain, the blanket, and the banked ash belong to history again. You do not have to keep watch over the ember. You do not have to test the door seam, tuck the child's feet, guard the bundle, or rise when the bell sounds in the frozen dark. Those hands have done their work. Those rooms have held their sleepers. Those ordinary skills have carried the night into morning. What remains is only the gentler shape of it. Wool holding warmth, straw whispering under weight, a cap pulled low, a shared bed breathing slowly behind a curtain, a hearth remembering one red coal beneath ash. The winter is still there, but it has become distant, softened by time and by the quiet fact that people kept going. So let the last image be simple. A low fire, a covered bed, pale light along the floor, the cold outside, the warmth inside, and your own breathing easy in the dark.